Velara tasted blood. The sharp, coppery tang flooded her mouth as she pressed a trembling hand against the wound in her side. The pain barely registered over the ringing in her ears, the aftermath of the blast that had torn through the bridge of her ship just moments ago. She staggered through the dimly lit corridor, the emergency lights casting an eerie red glow against the metallic walls. The Zephylex, her vessel, her pride, now lay in ruin above the storm-racked jungles of SRV. Smoke and flickering fire filled the passageways as she ran, her boots slipping on debris and pools of oil-like fluid leaking from shattered conduits. She knew the enemy wouldn't let her escape easily. The enemy. Velara let out a humorless laugh, coughing as she forced herself forward. The ones who had turned against her were not the human insurgents she had spent a decade battling. No, her assassins wore the same sigil she did. The sigil of the Zarin Dominion, the empire she had sworn to serve with her life. They had called it necessary. A purge. A course correction. Velara had seen the subtle shifts in policy, the increasing brutality against the conquered species, the erasure of those who spoke against the war. But she had remained loyal. She had obeyed, rationalized, silenced the doubts clawing at the edges of her mind. And now, because she hesitated one damn time, her own people had branded her a traitor. A blast struck the bulkhead inches from her head, sending shards of metal biting into her skin. She ducked into an emergency pod bay, slamming her palm against the control panel. The doors hissed shut behind her as another shot rang out. The pod was her only chance. She stumbled inside and collapsed into the seat, her vision swimming. Through the viewport, she saw the remains of the Zephylex breaking apart, its flaming wreckage scattering across the skies of SRV like falling stars. With the last of her strength, she slammed her fist onto the launch button. The world lurched violently as the pod jettisoned, sending her hurtling toward the dense, uncharted wilderness below. Marcus Fletcher was cataloging a species of luminescent insects when the sky caught fire. For months, he had lived in isolation on SRV, studying the delicate ecosystems of the planet's vast jungle. He was a biologist, not a soldier, far from the war that raged across the galaxy. The planet had been abandoned years ago when the conflict rendered it too unstable for habitation, making it the perfect sanctuary for his research. But now, streaks of burning debris rained from the heavens, and Marcus knew what that meant. He adjusted his visor and watched as a particularly large piece of wreckage, a pod, tumbled through the dense cloud cover, trailing smoke. His instincts warred against each other. Common sense told him to stay out of it, to avoid anything that might entangle him in the Dominion's war. And yet, if there was someone in that pod, they wouldn't last long. SRV's jungle was a predator's paradise. The undergrowth was thick with bioluminescent flora, but beyond its beauty lurked danger. Enormous reptilian hunters, venomous aerial creatures, and quicksand-like bogs claimed anything that wandered unprepared. Marcus exhaled sharply and slung his rifle over his shoulder. He had survived here for months. He could find the crash site. And maybe, just maybe, he could save whoever was inside. The heat was the first thing Velara noticed. The oppressive humidity of SRV wrapped around her like a suffocating cloak as she forced her eyes open. Her pod had crashed violently, the metal husk barely intact around her. She had managed to drag herself free, but her injuries were severe. Her right leg refused to move. Blood seeped from a wound in her abdomen. Every breath sent stabbing pain through her ribs. She was dying. A rustling in the foliage made her grip the knife at her belt. Through her blurred vision, she saw a figure approaching. Not a Zarin soldier. Not Dominion forces. A human. The realization sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through her system. Marcus barely had time to react before Velara lunged, tackling him despite her wounds. They crashed into the dirt, and before he could raise his weapon, her knife was at his throat. "Who are you?" she rasped, her breath ragged. "Are you with them?" Marcus held up his hands slowly. "I don't know who them is," he said carefully, "but I'm guessing they're not your friends." Valera's vision swam. She had lost too much blood. The effort of keeping the blade steady was almost too much. She wanted to interrogate him further, to demand answers. But the jungle spun around her, and then darkness. She awoke to the unfamiliar feeling of warmth. For a moment, her instincts screamed that she had been captured. But as her senses sharpened, she realized she was wrapped in crude but effective bandages, lying beneath a makeshift canopy. A fire crackled nearby, keeping the jungle's nocturnal predators at bay. And sitting beside the fire, monitoring her, was the human. Marcus glanced up as she stirred. "You're awake," he said simply. Velara tensed, scanning the surroundings for her weapons. She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain lanced through her ribs, making her wince. "Easy," Marcus said. "You took a nasty hit. If I hadn't found you, the wildlife would have finished the job." Velara studied him warily. "Why help me?" Marcus exhaled, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "I didn't exactly have a choice. You were bleeding out, and I couldn't just leave you there." Valera's eyes narrowed. "Your people are my enemies." He shrugged. "I don't care about the war." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the distant calls of unseen creatures echoing through the jungle. Velara felt something strange stir in her chest, something unfamiliar. For years, she had believed humanity to be weak, a species that had resisted dominion rule with reckless, futile defiance. And yet, here was one who had no reason to help her, but had done so anyway. "Your name," she said finally. "What is it?" "Marcus Fletcher." He tilted his head. "And you?" Velara hesitated before answering. "General Velara Ton of the Zarin Dominion." Marcus let out a low whistle. "General? Huh? So you're kind of a big deal." "I was," she admitted, her voice quiet. Marcus studied her for a moment, then leaned back against a rock. "Well, General Velara Ton, looks like you're stuck with me for now." The fire crackled between them, and for the first time in years, Velara felt something other than duty, guilt, or war. She felt uncertainty, and perhaps the faintest whisper of possibility. Valera's body ached with every breath, but she forced herself to sit up. She could not afford weakness, not here, not now. The jungle was alive with movement, the canopy shifting as unseen creatures slithered and scuttled in the darkness. She had fought in countless battles, faced death on 100 warfronts, yet the unpredictability of this planet unsettled her. She glanced at Marcus, who was tending to the fire, carefully feeding it dried branches. His movements were deliberate, controlled, an instinct honed by survival, not by war. She had underestimated him. "You said you don't care about the war," she muttered, her throat dry. "Then why are you here?" Marcus didn't look up. "SRV is an ecological goldmine. This place was untouched for centuries before your war spilled over. I was sent to document the wildlife before your dominion or the human rebels burned it all down." He paused, tossing a stick into the fire. "And then the supply ships stopped coming. My funding dried up. So I stayed." Velara frowned. "You stayed? Alone? On this planet?" Marcus gave her a lopsided grin. "It grows on you." A sharp, distant clicking sound cut through the night. Marcus's expression shifted in an instant, his body going still, his fingers tightening around his rifle. Velara recognized that kind of tension. Something was hunting them. Marcus silently gestured for her to stay down. He extinguished the fire with a quick kick of dirt and melted into the shadows, moving like he had done this before. Velara, weaponless and weakened, had little choice but to follow his lead. The jungle fell silent. Then, a blur of motion, a flash of glistening mandibles. Velara rolled instinctively as a massive, multi-limbed creature lunged at the spot where she had been seconds ago. It was chitinous, segmented, its body undulating like a serpent but supported by long, spindly legs. Two sets of black, expressionless eyes locked onto her, and its mandibles clacked hungrily. A shot rang out. The creature reeled back with an inhuman screech, greenish ichor spilling from its side. Marcus had taken the shot with uncanny precision, his rifle barrel still smoking. "Run!" he barked. Velara needed no further encouragement. Despite the pain, she pushed herself into a sprint, following Marcus as he wove through the dense undergrowth. The creature gave chase, its elongated body slithering through the foliage with unnatural speed. Up ahead, Marcus made a sudden turn, leaping over a jagged root structure and disappearing into the trees. Velara followed, her lungs burning, but as she rounded the corner, she felt the ground give way beneath her. She fell. Velara landed hard, the impact rattling her bones. Darkness swallowed her, and for a moment, she lay still, trying to catch her breath. Above, the distant screech of the predator echoed, but it did not follow. A dim light flickered nearby. Marcus. He had already activated a small handheld lamp, illuminating the space they had tumbled into. It was a cave, sprawling, its walls covered in bioluminescent fungi casting eerie green and violet hues across the rock. Pools of water glistened in the low light, and faint tremors vibrated through the stone beneath them. Velara groaned as she sat up, her leg throbbing in protest. Marcus crouched beside her. "You okay?" She exhaled sharply. "That depends. Did we just trade one predator for another?" Marcus glanced around, his expression wary. "Not sure yet. This place isn't on any of my maps." Velara ran a hand along the jagged rock beside her. The material was strange, smooth, almost metallic in places. Not natural. She narrowed her eyes. "This isn't just a cave," she murmured. Marcus followed her gaze and frowned. He reached out, brushing dust from a section of the wall. Beneath the dirt and moss, a symbol was etched into the stone. It was not human, and it was not Zarin. Silence stretched between them as they stared at the ancient markings. Velara, despite her years of training, felt something unfamiliar coil in her chest. Unease. "I've never seen anything like this before," Marcus admitted, running his fingers over the carved lines. "It's old. Older than the war. Maybe even older than both our species." Valera's mind raced. SRV had been dismissed as an unimportant world, wild, untamed, of little strategic value. But the Dominion's intelligence had been flawed before. Could something have been buried here? Something both sides had overlooked? "We should keep moving," she said, pushing herself upright. "If this cave has an exit, we need to find it before more of those things track us." Marcus nodded, though his gaze lingered on the carvings for a moment longer before he followed. They pressed deeper into the cavern, their footfalls echoing softly. The air grew cooler, the damp scent of earth giving way to something metallic. Then, a hum. Velara halted. "Do you hear that?" Marcus stiffened. "Yeah, and I don't think we're alone." Ahead, the passage widened into a massive chamber. At its center stood a structure, tall, monolithic, humming faintly with a rhythmic pulse. It was technology, ancient, still alive. Valera's pulse quickened. "This is Dominion architecture," she whispered, "but different, more advanced than anything I've seen." Marcus circled the structure warily. "You're telling me your people built this?" "No," Velara murmured. "I think my people found it first, and they kept it secret." A realization settled over her like a weight. If the Dominion had known about this, it meant the war. Her war was built on lies even deeper than she had imagined. And now, she was standing in the middle of one of them. A sharp beat pierced the air. The hum grew louder. Symbols lit up across the structure's surface, pulsing in rapid succession. Marcus took a step back. Tell me that's not bad." Valera's gut told her otherwise. The cavern trembled. A deep, guttural clicking sound echoed from the darkness beyond. Then came the lights, dozens of them, blinking awake like slumbering eyes. Something had just woken up, and it was watching them. The chamber pulsed with alien energy, the strange monolithic structure awakening from its slumber. Velara and Marcus stood frozen, their breath shallow as the cavern walls trembled. Then, movement. From the depths of the cavern, shadows twisted unnaturally. The blinking lights were not just part of the machine. They were eyes. Watching. Calculating. Valera's instinct screamed to move, but she was a soldier. She studied the enemy first. The figures emerging from the dark were tall, thin-limbed, and inhumanly smooth. Their bodies a seamless blend of organic tissue and metallic plating. Their heads lacked discernible features, save for those unblinking, glowing eyes. Marcus took a step back, gripping his rifle. "Tell me your people made these things." Valera's fingers twitched toward her knife. No, and if the Dominion knew about them, they never told anyone. The creatures did not charge. Instead, they stood in eerie stillness, their elongated fingers curling slightly as if testing the air. Then, one of them tilted its head, the glow in its eyes shifting. A sound rippled through the chamber, a distorted, warbled voice. Trespassers. The word was barely recognizable, a fractured echo of some long-dead dialect. The thing took a step forward, and the air around it seemed to bend, as though space itself was uncertain of its presence. Marcus swallowed hard. I don't like this. Velara tightened her grip on her blade. Neither do I. The lead figure twitched, its body momentarily glitching, as though struggling to maintain its form. And then, it attacked. It moved faster than Velara had expected. One moment it was still, the next it was inches from her, claws slicing through the air. She barely dodged in time, rolling across the cavern floor as Marcus fired his rifle. The plasma bolt struck the creature's torso, but passed through it, as though hitting smoke. Marcus cursed. That's not fair. Velara wasn't listening. She had seen technology like this before. Experimental Dominion prototypes that phased between dimensions, flickering between real space and void. But those were incomplete, unstable. These creatures had perfected it. The machine lunged again, this time at Marcus. He barely managed to block its strike with his rifle, but the impact sent him crashing backward into the monolith. The structure reacted instantly. Its surface rippled, symbols flashing wildly as energy surged through it. Valera's gut twisted. Whatever he just triggered, it's not good. The air crackled. The remaining creatures let out a distorted, metallic screech and began to retreat, not in fear, but in obedience. Velara grabbed Marcus, yanking him away from the monolith just as the entire cavern shifted. The walls morphed, their rough stone surfaces smoothing into polished black metal. The air became denser, heavier, charged with something unseen. Marcus groaned. Please tell me that's just my concussion making everything weird. Valera's throat tightened. No, something just changed. She turned toward the monolith, only to freeze. A figure stood before it now, one that hadn't been there before. It was not like the others. This one was taller, broader, its form more defined. It wore armor, not constructed like Zarin plating or human gear, but grown, an extension of itself, and its eyes, deep set, glowing faintly, held awareness. It had not simply awakened. It had been waiting. The figure regarded them for a long moment. Then, in perfect, measured clarity, it spoke. You should not have come here. Marcus tensed, his rifle still raised. So, who wants to ask the obvious question? Velara didn't hesitate. She met the figure's gaze. Who are you? The being's head tilted slightly. That is not the right question. A pulse of energy surged through the chamber, and suddenly Valera's vision burned. Images flooded her mind. Starships burning, civilizations crumbling, the endless cycle of war and conquest. But at the center of it all, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The Dominion sigil. Velara staggered, her heart hammering. You know my people. The being stepped forward. I knew them long before they became what they are now. Marcus glanced between them. Okay, that's vague and unsettling. Can we get a name? The figure's gaze flicked toward him, unreadable. Then, it spoke. I am Cathus. Valera's breath caught. The name meant nothing to Marcus, but to her, impossible. She had studied the Dominion's history for decades. The ancient wars, the rise of their empire. And in the forgotten records, *** buried beneath propaganda and rewritten history. *** there was one name that had always been erased. Cathus the Betrayer. A figure who had once stood at the height of the Dominion's power. A warlord, a tactician, a conqueror, who had vanished thousands of years ago. And now, he stood before her. Alive. Waiting. Marcus, oblivious to the weight of the name, frowned. So, Cathus, what exactly did we wake up? Cathus studied them both for a long moment. Then, in a voice like grinding steel, he said, The end of everything. The words settled over them like a death sentence. Velara clenched her fists. Explain. Cathus turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over the cavern as if remembering something long forgotten. Your dominion is a shadow of an empire that once ruled the stars, he said. It was not the first. It will not be the last. Marcus crossed his arms. Great. More cryptic nonsense. Velara ignored him. If you knew the dominion before it rose, then you were part of it? Cathus nodded. I was its foundation. The air seemed to chill. Valera's mind reeled. If Cathus had lived that long, if he had seen the dominion before it became what it was today, then what else had been hidden from history? She narrowed her eyes. Then why did you disappear? Why is your name erased from every record? Cathus let out something that might have been a laugh. It was a hollow, unnatural sound. Because I tried to stop them. The words hit her like a blade to the gut. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Let me guess. They didn't take it well? Cathus's expression darkened. I was cast out, buried. My name wiped from history, my existence denied. And yet, they still fear me. Velara exhaled slowly. Because you know something. Something they don't want anyone to find. Cathus stepped closer. And now, you have found it. The cavern trembled once more, and Valera's instinct screamed at her. Danger was coming. The Dominion would come looking for her. And now, they had a reason to kill her again. Cathus regarded her with something almost like curiosity. So tell me, General Velara Ton, will you run again? Or will you fight for the truth? The question cut deeper than any wound. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't know the answer. Velara stared at Cathus, her pulse thundering in her ears. His words rattled something inside her, something she had spent years suppressing. The possibility that she had been fighting for a lie. Marcus, standing beside her, sighed. Well, that's a hell of a question. Valera's grip tightened around the hilt of her knife. You claim to have been part of the Dominion before it became what it is today. But if you were cast out, buried, forgotten, why are you still alive? No Zarin has ever lived for thousands of years. Cathus inclined his head slightly. You assume I am still like you. Before she could respond, he raised a clawed hand and pressed it against the monolithic structure. The symbols along its surface pulsed, and the air around him shimmered. For a brief moment, Velara saw past the illusion. Beneath his armor, beneath the organic plating, was something else. His flesh was not entirely real, not entirely there. It shifted, flickered, like the phasing machine she had seen in experimental Dominion labs. Marcus took a slow step back. What are you? Cathus lowered his hand, and the distortion vanished. I am what remains. Valera's mind raced. This was not just an exile, not just a rogue warrior lost to time. Cathus had become something else, something neither alive nor dead, trapped in the fabric of this place. Marcus muttered under his breath, I'm gonna vote Ghost Robot Warlord until I get a better explanation. Velara ignored him. You said the Dominion erased you because you tried to stop them. Stop them from what? Cathus was silent for a moment, as if considering his answer. Then, his eyes glowed brighter. From becoming what they are now. The cavern trembled again. This time, not from the monolith, but from above. Velara immediately recognized the sound. Orbital bombardment. She whirled toward Marcus. Get down. A split second later, a thunderous explosion ripped through the ceiling of the cavern. Stone cracked, dust and debris rained down, and a blast of heat surged through the chamber as something enormous impacted the surface above. The Dominion had found her, and they were not alone. Through the gaping hole in the cavern ceiling, Velara caught a glimpse of the sky. Red, burning, filled with the silhouettes of incoming dropships. Marcus coughed through the dust. I assume these are the guys trying to kill you? Valera's heart pounded. They're not just trying anymore. From above, the distinct whine of high-energy pulse weapons rang out. Dominion commandos, elite execution squads, trained to eliminate high-value targets with precision, were already descending into the cavern on repulsor harnesses. Velara recognized the emblem on their armor. They weren't just any Dominion forces. They were the Sovereign's wrath. Assassins. They weren't here to capture her. They were here to erase her. Cathus turned his gaze upward. They fear the truth, so they bring fire to silence it. Velara grabbed Marcus's arm, yanking him toward cover as the first plasma bolts slammed into the stone around them. Marcus swore. Yeah, okay. We're officially past the point of talking this out. Valera's mind worked in overdrive. They had no weapons capable of taking on a full Dominion kill squad, no backup, and no escape route. Even if they ran, the jungle outside would be crawling with patrols. She turned to Cathus. You said the Dominion buried you. You said they fear you. Can you fight? Cathus's gaze locked onto her, and for the first time, a slow, dangerous smile curved across his inhuman features. I was a warlord once, General. Let me remind them why. He moved. Not ran. Not walked. He vanished. 1 second he was beside them. The next, he was in the air, among the Dominion soldiers. A scream. A flash of curved, metallic claws. A body ripped from its harness, armor crushed like paper. The execution squad hesitated, but only for a second. Then, they adjusted, their tactics shifting to account for an unknown variable. More bolts of plasma lit up the cavern. Marcus ducked behind a rock, glancing at Velara. So, that's our terrifying new friend? Velara gritted her teeth. Less talking, more surviving. She yanked a fallen Dominion rifle from a dead commando's grip, feeling the familiar weight settle in her hands. This was no longer an escape. This was a battle, and she was done running. The cavern had become a war zone. Cathus moved like a ghost of the battlefield, phasing in and out of visibility, striking before the Dominion commandos could react. He was not bound by the same rules of time and space. Velara, on the other hand, fought like the soldier she was trained to be. She took 2 shots, center mass. 1 enemy down. A second flanked her. She ducked under his blade, drove her knee into his chest, and tore his throat out with her knife. Marcus, crouched behind a fallen slab of stone, muttered, "You are way scarier than I expected." Velara didn't respond. Her mind was on the numbers. Too many. Even with Cathus cutting through them like a storm, there were more dropships incoming. If they didn't leave now, they would be overwhelmed. She spotted something through the smoke. A Dominion command console, built into the cavern wall. It had likely been set up to monitor the monolith. But to Velara, it meant a chance. She sprinted for it, dodging plasma fire. If she could access their comms, she could intercept their kill orders. She reached the console, slammed her palm against the interface, and access denied. Velara snarled. Of course they locked her out. Behind her, Marcus shouted, "Velara, you might want to move." She turned, just as a Dominion soldier lunged. A blade pierced through her side. Pain, hot and searing, exploded through her ribs. Velara gasped, but forced herself to move. She grabbed the soldier's wrist and twisted, snapping it with a sharp crack. The soldier screamed. She ripped the blade from her own body and drove it into his throat. Blood splattered across her armor. Marcus was already at her side, eyes wide. Shit, Velara? I'm fine, she growled. It was a lie. She was bleeding out. But they weren't done yet. Cathus landed beside them, his claws still dripping with Dominion blood. His eyes glowed as he looked at her wound. Your Dominion does not hesitate to destroy its own, he mused. Valera's vision blurred for a second, but she steadied herself. We have to get out of here. We need a way off this planet. Cathus studied her. Then, without a word, he turned and pressed his hand against the monolith again. The symbols flashed. The cavern rumbled. And then, behind the monolith, a hidden passageway slid open. Beyond it, a ship. Ancient. Still intact. Valera's heart skipped a beat. A way out. But even as hope flickered in her chest, she knew the Dominion would not let them leave alive. The cavern's hidden passage yawned before them, dust and debris rolling away as the massive stone slabs slid apart. Beyond the threshold, bathed in dim, flickering light, an ancient warship lay dormant. Valera's breath hitched. It was unlike any Dominion vessel she had ever seen. Its hull was smooth yet jagged, a fusion of sleek design and brutal efficiency. The metal was dark, with faint veins of pulsing energy running across its surface, like the ship itself was alive. Marcus exhaled. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Velara wasn't either. But she knew one thing. This ship was their only chance. Behind them, the cavern still echoed with battle. The remaining Dominion commandos were regrouping, moving with practiced efficiency. More dropships would be arriving soon. If they didn't leave now, they never would. Cathus stepped toward the ship, his gaze unreadable. The Dominion buried many things, he murmured. Not all of them stayed dead. Velara gritted her teeth and pushed forward, ignoring the searing pain from her wound. As she reached the ship's hull, a panel flickered to life beneath her touch. The symbols etched into its surface recognized her. That sent a chill down her spine. The ship had been waiting. For her. The entrance hissed open, revealing a dark corridor leading deeper inside. Marcus hesitated. Are we just walking into this thing? No checks, no scanning, just, hey, let's step inside the creepy ghost ship? Velara shot him a look. Would you rather stay out here? A fresh barrage of plasma fire answered for him. Okay, fair point. They rushed inside. The second they crossed the threshold, the ship reacted. Lights flickered on, casting the interior in a dim, eerie glow. The walls pulsed faintly, like the veins of a sleeping giant beginning to stir. Then, a voice rumbled through the ship. Identity confirmed. General Velara TAN. Access granted. Valera's stomach dropped. Marcus blinked. That's creepy, even by today's standards. Cathus's gaze darkened. It knows you. Velara didn't answer. She couldn't, because the only explanation was impossible. The ship had been designed for her, but she had never seen it before in her life. There was no time to unravel the mystery now. She pushed forward, heading toward what she assumed was the bridge. We need to get this ship in the air. Cathus, can you? But Cathus was already moving, his claws sweeping over the control interface like someone who had done this before. The ship trembled, awakening. Outside, the Dominion forces must have realized what was happening. They charged toward the opening, weapons raised. And then the ship sealed itself shut. A low hum resonated through the hull. Then, power. Velara could feel it. This was no ordinary ship. It was a weapon, and it had just woken up. The entire cavern shook as the warship's engines flared to life. Dust and debris rained from above, cracks spreading through the rock like fractured glass. On the bridge, Velara gripped the console, her fingers digging into the metal as the ship's systems booted up around her. Holographic displays flickered to life, revealing the outside battlefield. Dominion dropships circled above, their cannons locking onto the warship. A voice crackled through the ship's speakers. Dominion command. General Velara Tan. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Velara let out a slow breath. She knew that voice. Admiral Zyros, a man who had once been her mentor. His tone was ice. You do not comprehend the forces you are meddling with, General. Stand down. Now. Marcus snorted. Well, that doesn't sound promising. Velara ignored him, pressing a button on the console. You sent an execution squad, Zyros. Her voice was steel. You made your decision. A pause. Then, that ship does not belong to you. Something in his tone sent a chill down her spine. Marcus, glancing at the holographic readouts, frowned. Velara? She turned. What? He pointed to a flashing symbol on the display. The Dominion ships weren't preparing to fire. They were transmitting something. Marcus's face paled. They're calling reinforcements. Valera's blood ran cold. She spun toward Cathus. Can we launch? Cathus's claws moved across the interface in sharp, precise motions. The ship is waking, but it requires a destination. Valera's mind raced. They couldn't just leave the system. The Dominion would hunt them down. They needed a place to hide, somewhere no one would follow. Then it hit her. The Veil Nebula. A sector so unstable, so violent, that no Dominion fleet dared enter. A place where secrets were buried. She turned back to Cathus. Set coordinates for the Veil Nebula. Cathus's glowing eyes flickered, as if he recognized the name. But he said nothing. He entered the coordinates. The ship's engines roared. Outside, the Dominion ships finally opened fire. But it was too late. The ancient warship surged forward, cutting through the cavern like a blade through flesh. Then, they were airborne. The jungle below blurred, the sky erupting in fire as Dominion forces scrambled to pursue. Velara gritted her teeth. Engage, FTL. Marcus braced himself. This is gonna suck, isn't it? The ship lurched. The stars stretched. And in a single heartbeat, they vanished. The warship hurtled through space, its hull groaning as it adjusted to velocities it had not reached in centuries. Velara exhaled slowly, her hands still clenched around the control panel. For the first time in her life, she was a fugitive. Marcus collapsed into a nearby seat, running a hand through his hair. So, that happened. Velara ignored him, her eyes locked on Cathus. You knew about this ship? Cathus's expression was unreadable. I knew it existed, but I did not know it waited for you. Valera's gut twisted. Why does it recognize me? Cathus was silent for a long moment. Then, because it was meant for you. Marcus groaned. I swear, if this turns into another cryptic prophecy. Velara cut him off. Explain. Now. Cathus's glowing eyes locked onto hers. The Dominion did not create this ship. They stole it. Valera's breath caught. Cathus continued, his voice dark. This was not just a warship. It was a command vessel, one of the first. Built not to conquer, but to lead. Marcus frowned. Wait, you're saying this thing was designed for a ruler? Cathus's gaze never wavered. No, not a ruler. His next words sent ice through Valera's veins. A revolution. Silence. Valera's mind raced. This ship wasn't just a relic. It was a weapon meant to overthrow the Dominion itself. And now, it belonged to her. Valera's pulse thundered in her ears. A revolution. She had spent her life serving the Dominion, obeying orders, rising through the ranks. But now, standing on the bridge of a forgotten warship, she was beginning to understand. She had never been in control. Cathus had known the truth all along. She turned to face him. You said this ship was meant to lead a revolution. Then tell me, who built it? Cathus's glowing eyes remained fixed on her. The same ones who built the Dominion. Marcus, who had been silent until now, let out a sharp breath. You're saying the Dominion wasn't the first empire? Cathus inclined his head. It was merely the latest. A cycle that repeats. Expansion, conquest, decay, and always those who seek to break free. His gaze sharpened on Velara. Your people tried to erase history, but history does not forget. Valera's stomach twisted. The Dominion had not risen on its own strength. It had been built on the ashes of something older, something the sovereign had buried. And now, she was flying one of the weapons they had tried to erase. Marcus sat forward, rubbing his temples. Okay, just to clarify, the warship we just stole? It belonged to an ancient rebel faction that tried to take down the original rulers of the Dominion? Cathus nodded once. Marcus exhaled. I hate how much sense that makes. Velara clenched her fists. And you waited for someone like me to find it? Cathus tilted his head slightly. Not waited. Watched. Velara went cold. How long had he been waiting? How much of her career had already been decided before she even knew what side she was truly on? She exhaled sharply, forcing herself to focus. It doesn't matter. The Dominion will hunt us. We need to disappear. Cathus merely turned toward the ship's interface. That is why you chose the Veil Nebula. The navigation console pulsed. They were close now. The swirling mass of the nebula loomed ahead. A storm of ionized gas and collapsing gravitational fields. No sane pilot would enter, which made it the perfect hiding place. But Velara knew they couldn't run forever. The Dominion would not stop until they found her, until they erased her. She gritted her teeth. Once we land, we need to figure out what this ship is capable of. If it really was meant to lead a revolution, she hesitated, then maybe it still can. Marcus blinked. Wait, are you saying? Velara turned toward him. Her voice was firm. I'm saying I'm done fighting for the wrong side. Silence filled the bridge. Then, Marcus let out a short, breathless laugh. Holy shit. He shook his head. You just went from betrayed fugitive to potential revolutionary leader in about 10 minutes. Velara narrowed her eyes. Do you have a better plan? Marcus raised his hands in surrender. Nope. Just making sure we all acknowledge how absolutely insane this is. Velara turned to Cathus. You said this ship was meant to lead a rebellion. She took a slow breath. Then I need to know, how do we win? Cathus studied her for a long moment. Then, he reached forward, tapping a series of symbols on the interface. The ship responded immediately. A holographic star map flickered into existence, filled with thousands of glowing points. Velara's eyes widened. They weren't just random locations. They were hidden strongholds, lost fleets, secret bases buried in the void. Velara exhaled slowly. The Dominion had spent centuries crushing rebellion before it could even begin, but they had never destroyed it completely. It was still out there, waiting, scattered, but not broken. And now, she had the key to finding them. Marcus whistled low. That's a lot of potential allies. Velara nodded. Enough to start something real. Cathus stepped forward. The Dominion believes it has already won, that the cycle will continue, that nothing can change. He met Velara's gaze. Prove them wrong. The weight of it settled onto her shoulders. She had risked everything to survive. Now, she had a reason to fight. The war was not over. It was only just beginning. Velara turned to the controls, her decision made. Let's wake them up. Deep within Dominion space, Admiral Zyros stood before the holographic war table, his jaw tight with barely contained rage. Sir, a technician reported. Velara Tan's ship has disappeared into the Veil Nebula. No tracking signal detected. Zyros's fists clenched. That warship should not have been found. The Sovereign would demand answers. But Zyros already knew the truth. Velara had chosen her fate. And in doing so, she had ignited something dangerous. The cycle of conquest would continue, unless she broke it. Zyros exhaled slowly, his voice cold. Mobilize the fleets. Find her. And this time, do not let her escape.